Welcome to this week's episode, Courageous Culture. In this episode, Jeff and Erin sit down with growth advisor Ericka Hyson to break down why organizations winning right now aren't the smartest or the fastest, they're the most courageous. If you ever wondered whether your culture is actually built for change or just built to cope with it, you're in the right place.
Being courageous is not about making a bold speech or having all the answers in this time. It actually means being honest and vulnerable enough to say, I don't have all the answers. Sometimes having great questions is a better sign of authentic leadership than having all the answers.
Highly Adaptive is a podcast where staffing and consulting leaders learn to outpace change. Hosted by Jeff Pelliccio and Erin MacKenzie, they'll cut through the noise to bring you practical moves you could use right now to grow, adapt, and lead. Let me ask you something. When you look at organizations that are actually moving right now, not just surviving, but genuinely adapting and growing, what do you think is separating them from everyone else? Most people say technology, some say talent, and a lot say timing. But what if it's none of those things? What if it's courage? Not that inspirational version of courage where it's sort of the poster on the wall at work, not the keynote topic that we've all sat in about courage, but the real kind. The willingness to have conversations your organization is avoiding, to invite people into the discomfort of change, and to build a culture where that behavior isn't the exception, it's the expectation. That's what we're going to get into today. And I'll be honest, this one hits close to home for me because building this kind of culture is a lot harder than it sounds. And a lot of people who do it really well are very deliberate about it. So we've got someone today with us who has lived this as an operator, as an advisor, and as someone who has spent 20 years helping leaders build the kind of organizations that people actually want to work inside of. So grab your notebooks because this conversation is going to give you something to act on for sure.
I am incredibly excited here because our guest has built her career doing something rare, telling leaders the truth, including the truth to me at many times throughout my career. But as a growth advisor working with CEOs and founders of staffing firms, she's the person in the room who asks the question everyone else is avoiding. And I've had those questions. But I'm very, very excited because she has spent 2 decades at Ettain Group, growing alongside the company from its earliest days to building it to over 150 million in revenue to help sell it. So when she talks about what it takes to build a culture that can actually scale and change, she's not working from theory. She's honestly working from inside the machine. She's also a co-author of the Lady Leaders Book Club, a community builder, a champion of underrepresented voices in leadership, and we're going to get to this, but someone with a seriously impressive craft game, which I think is one of your fun facts that I'm going to bring up here. But I'm excited to introduce my friend of many years. Her and I started our relationship in a boardroom that was probably late at night eating Greek food in Charlotte, North Carolina. But I'm excited to introduce Ericka Hyson. Welcome, Ericka.
Thank you so much, Erin and Jeff, for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Awesome.
It's so much fun. I mean, you and I started our career. Well, I started my career knowing you when I was probably in my 20s. I was a baby.
We both were.
We won't talk about how old I am now. It's been so fun. So Ericka, I think we always like to kind of open things up with like a fun fact around, hey, let's get to know the guest. And there's something that I think many people may know or may not know, but you are probably one of the craftiest, which I don't know if that's a word. I'm going to term it.
I think
craftiest. Is it a word? Craftiest? We're going to go for it. You're one of the craftiest people I absolutely know. So what all have you made? What are some of the different crafts that you're working on right now or recently have made?
Yes, Erin, I have all the grandma skills. It's really what it is.
I love it.
I have a lot of creative energy, whatever that part of my brain is. It helps me relax. It's very meditative for me. Especially after a busy day at work, to just really have some alone time and really be, thinking about things and making things with my hands. I come from a big line of strong women who showed me the way when I was a young girl. My great grandmother gave me a blanket that's been really special to me even at 52. And when my nephew, who is now 19, was born, it really inspired me to want to give handmade heirlooms, something that my friends' children and my family could cherish forever. So I started making things for babies, burp cloths, blankets, bibs, clothes when I had my own son. So it's been like 19 years of a lot of sewing. I was very prepared. I went from being a fabric hoarder to suddenly very prepared during the pandemic, making masks for frontline workers and schools and nursing homes. And I really just love to do it for fun. So sewing is my primary thing, but I'm also a lifetime learner. So I always think things are 5-minute projects and, well, this looks fun. Could I make something? So last time we talked, I was actually inspired by a shopping experience I had right before the holidays. I was putting some gift baskets together for some clients, and the woman in the market where I was making these like ornaments that had little tiny books in them for their book club that they host at their shop. And I was
love that.
Oh my gosh, I want to make those for all the lady leaders in my book club. So the co-authors that we wrote 2 books together, we read over 20 books as a book club over the past 5 years. And so I thought it would be a 5-minute holiday project to make them little miniature ornaments with copies of all the books that we read. So 15 people times 20 books, do the math. It was a project. They ended up, I had to pivot.
Not so much as 5 minutes.
Yes, but I really enjoyed every minute of it. And they're very useless little books, but they are certainly full of sentimental value because it's literally all the books we read together. And I put them all in a little ornament shaped like a heart, and they got them for Valentine's Day.
Oh, I love
That's
this.
amazing. I love it. I love it.
A little bit late for Christmas, but we made it. I made it in time for the holidays.
There you
go. I can't wait to dig more offline on your crafting stuff because I have some questions.
I was going to say, like, do you have any apprentices? Like, someone obviously shared these skills with you when you were younger. Like, do you have like those budding interests from people in your family who are like looking to Ericka to like pass along those skills?
I'll tell you, my best girlfriends have these sayings about me as the person who always talks people into doing things because I make them sound really fun. My 15-year-old son does not think that like sewing and crafting is as much fun as I do. So a lot of times I'm on my own, Jeff, unfortunately.
Maybe. Listen, you said he's 15?
Yes.
There's time. There's time. There might be a window that exists, but that's amazing. I think like when you find those opportunities to sort of like doing things with your hands and being creative in that aspect, I think they require you to also do like planning and critical thinking and like being quick on your feet. And so I'm sure that a lot of that sort of transcends both sides of your world, from being like on your personal side, from your crafting to your advising. And so let's dig into how we get companies to focus on courage as a differentiator. So first, in kicking this off, let's dig into like why it's a variable right now. What do you think actually separates organizations that are moving with confidence right now from those that sort of just like feel stuck where they are today?
Oh my gosh. The timing of today's episode could not just be more relevant. I think since we've started like conceptualizing on us talking about courage being such a powerful variable in leadership, I've been paying more attention to it, right, as a theme. And I think, really, it's not really the market that's going to stall you as a business leader or business owner. It's really fear. Right. And the biggest difference I see across organizations isn't like about how much you know or how smart you are or how strategic your plan is or what all the process people are doing over here. It's really about having the courage to act. It's the momentum that happens when you do something within your control, right? What are the things outside of our control that sometimes paralyze us? And the leaders that are winning are not the ones that are like have all the boxes checked and they're like, okay, this is 100% going to work. It's like they're the ones that are most willing to take action and try, right? Just start by starting. And having that clarity is really, an act of courage, not necessarily intelligence, right? You can just sit and learn all day, but it can really result in change paralysis. So sometimes it's just like getting in and get going.
So taking the risk, like to actually like jump in there. Do you see leaders kind of getting things wrong about doing something versus kind of acting with intention? You mentioned clarity, but would be interested in that.
I kind of grew up in a culture of ask for permission later and, have courage to try something and be okay with failure. And, raising a high school age child, I'm really conscious of this, right? Of like this idea that things have to be perfect and I can't make a mistake. It's really healthy to try something and learn. You could sit and wait for someone else to do it first, but you're already going to be behind, right? Or maybe you'll never do it, right? At that point, you might become irrelevant. So, there's also an element, with the rise of AI, with a lot of uncertainty and unknowns. There's also this element of like leaders thinking that they should be doing something. So they're just doing something without any clarity. So I think it's important not to just be like, I need to go do something. It's like, well, let's figure out what we're trying to solve for. What's the business? What are we trying to accomplish? And then we, maybe creating a space where it's safe to experiment and to take action. You don't have to boil the whole ocean. Maybe you could start in a certain area and really be willing to disrupt yourself. You don't have to be the smartest ones. You might just need to have some clarity of like, okay, let's start right here. Let's not wait.
It's funny that you mentioned AI too, like, because I know as I reflect back on like what my last year was like, there was this moment of mania, right? Like there was this moment where I didn't have enough clarity, but I just needed to act. I needed to like kind of get my hands dirty and play with it a bit and sort of figure it out. Like that was sort of like my educational curve. Do you find that people sort of get stuck into that framework of just acting and maybe like lose sight of identifying that purpose when they don't necessarily have the clarity up front?
I feel like there's been more paralysis than people just acting.
Okay.
Right now, I think it's like the anxiety has like created this fear. Just last week, I was talking to a roundtable of 16 CEOs that I facilitate, and we were having a fun discussion about this disruption of AI and robotics on the staffing industry. And, it was a courageous discussion, right? Of each leader sharing kind of what's happening in their world. And just the fact that we're talking about it is a good sign. And, when asked, like, what are you doing to learn what's happening with your clients, right? How are you engaging with your customers to have the same conversation? What are they thinking about? What's keeping them up at night? What are they excited about? Not everyone, but there are some people that just would rather not talk about it because I don't have to talk about it. It doesn't exist, right? I'm afraid to have the conversation because it might make my role irrelevant. Is the idea. Or, in the technology industry, this is like the first time a CEO publicly announced that their financial technology firm is laying off, thousands of people due to AI. This is a first, right? To put a name on it and say, this is the reason why our workforce is being reduced versus saying, we overstaffed during the pandemic and we're doing layoffs to our shareholders. So there's a lot of anxiety about and uncertainty in general. And so, how that type of anxiety, people don't know what to do. So they're kind of stuck. It's like, well, what can I be doing? And, I always like to encourage people to think about the things that are outside of their control and the things that are inside of their control. And what are the things that you can start doing today?
Are there certain signals that you look at from that? Because specifically when it comes to like AI, I think there's sometimes where leaders are acting under pressure, not necessarily pressure from the rest of their team, but it also could be pressure from other CEOs. What is society saying you need to be using that? But is there different signals where you see someone working under pressure rather than through courage on that? Because you mentioned like some will just sit back, get them to look at different things. So it'd be interesting for me to learn.
I think the anecdotal story I'll share around that is like with technology adoption internally. So if our primary audience for this podcast are staffing and talent acquisition leaders, internally comparing your tech stack to that of your peer. Like, do I need this technology? There's a lot of new tools and toys out there, and there's this concept of like being whitewashed with AI because everything has a little flavor via AI and it can be very confusing. And how do I navigate? But gosh, if I don't go do something, I'm going to get left behind. And so this is the inflection point where decisions can be made without like informing them, right? So it's like, wait, this might be a time where you take a little bit of a pause and say, okay, well, what are we trying to accomplish? Let's just not use it. Let's just not use it to get on the bandwagon and say, we're implementing AI. Like, be really thoughtful about how you're aligning automation, technology, AI being part of that to support making people deliver more amazing experiences for your customers. Like, if you put your customer and say, like, how do we make it easy to buy from us? And where are the gaps? Where's the friction? Is it involved 10 people and 5 spreadsheets to get something done? Like, start there. And it makes it super simple to start doing something instead of just doing it because I need to do it. I feel like I need to be doing something. In the absence of being educated, it can be kind of daunting, right? It's like, oh, I don't know where to begin.
I love the advice, right? You're offering advice to like look at the thing from like a tactile approach, right? What is before you start defining what it is you're going to do, like go back to those bits and figure out where your friction points or your gaps are, and then decide like which one do you want to try to attack. I absolutely love that. I think that oftentimes we find ourselves in this space where it's a lot easier to identify a gap and then trying to identify a solution that someone else may have already pursued. So like when there's like automation, it happened during automation, it happened as the ATSs and CRMs got more robust, especially in the staffing industry. But AI is a bit more broad scope. It's a different type of technology, right? So it's not as though you can say like, well, I'm missing, point B, so I can't do A plus B equals C. Like AI kind of sits in its own arena. And so now it could be, well, that is a point further down the line. If you haven't planned for it or staged it, then it's not going to work appropriately for you. So it certainly gets to that point where you have analysis paralysis, right? You get into that moment where you're like, I don't know what to do next.
Right. And that's internally, right? But then what else, how is AI impacting the future of work is like the macro level. Like, it's like, okay, what's happening with my clients right now? We just heard about 4,000 people being reduced. Like, how will robots, potentially replace humans and or technology? I think that's like the other thing that leaders have on their mind right now, which, these are very different topics around AI that leaders are thinking about right now. It's
sure,
right. It's about the fear that their business is going to decline because their best customer is replacing jobs with technology. And then also thinking about it for themselves. Like, how are we going to be? What is our strategy? And then also, how do I make sure we're still relevant to keep up with our customers and their strategy? It's a lot.
There's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, the pivot, the shift, because you got to think through all of that. I don't know. You just said robotics, and I was really thinking it'd be great if I had a robot that could clean my dog's poop up every single morning. So there's also that there could be some really good wins to this. This is where my mind goes. But Ericka, really, honestly, I mean, it really seems that like the leaders that are like winning right now aren't necessarily the ones that are like the most informed. They're the ones that are really kind of willing to act with clarity and understanding everything before they actually have the answers. So kind of where I see this. So if like courage to be able to move forward, if courage is a differentiator, what does it actually look like in practice? And where do leaders get it wrong? Where do they need to go?
I love that. I love that question. I mean, just in the context of what we're just talking about, being courageous is not like about making a bold speech or having all the answers. And I think in this time, like, it actually means being honest and vulnerable enough to say, I don't have all the answers. And, using the example of bringing value up the chain, like one thing you could do right now that's low risk is go have a conversation with your customer and find out what they're doing.
Yeah.
If they know what's going on, and have a dialogue, and perhaps you can commiserate a little bit about sleepless nights and find out what they're doing, and lean into that as to figure out what you can be doing to help solve for some of their challenges. That's have a conversation. I think the leaders who admit that they don't know all the answers,
Sure.
ask your team, like, what are we hearing? What are we hearing from our customers on this topic? Are we asking them, how do we make sure our team feels empowered, that it's a safe space to go ask these questions to their customer and to not have all the answers? I think vulnerability as a leader is sometimes really difficult, and it might be a muscle that's very hard to flex for some leaders, to say, I don't have all the answers, this is what you should do. To be able to bring a problem and ask more intelligent questions, and not always have the answers. Sometimes having great questions is a better sign of authentic leadership than having all the answers.
So true.
So how do you navigate that space, right? Because so we're talking about here, like, trying to use courage as a differentiator. If your leadership team isn't being vulnerable, then that also creates a barrier of entry for others to be vulnerable, because you're not extending that olive branch, right? You're not creating that safe place for others to feel like they can participate without guarding their words and actions to having a successful outcome, right? Like, you want people to be able to play in that space. You want people to be able to share ideas. So where does the first step have to occur? I guess that would be kind of the question there, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is where we kind of go back to your culture and what you're trying to build, right? And I've had the privilege of being on the rocket ships that have shared one thing in common, and it's something that I'm really passionate about. Especially, I gravitate towards entrepreneurs and founders who, are have a lot of that entrepreneurial edge inside of their companies. And what I found from experience is that when you first define your core values, not in a way that's like poster on the wall, but like really try to figure out, like, what is it that we stand for and what are our non-negotiables? And then, how do those show up? That when you build a culture based on, performing in a way that your behaviors align with your values, but also being able to decide at what level are you going to empower your employees to be the smartest people in the room. It's a leadership culture thing. Like, what kind of leadership culture do you have? Do you have a leadership culture where you're empowering all of your employees to lead by example, to hold peers accountable, to hold themselves accountable, not wait for the person with the title manager and their title to come in and say, hey, Jeff, I saw your activity report yesterday, versus saying, I sit next to you in my office and I heard you had a tough conversation and I'm your peer. And I say, hey, Jeff, you had a tough call just now. Instead of razzing you about it, saying, do you think they're going to call you back? Say, hey, do you want to talk about it? Right? Like, where people are empowered to lead from the front without the title. And, I think that's one common thread in all the businesses I've been a part of. It's like, how do you really allow your employees to feel and act like business owners? Right? For starting the first day, like, run your desk like it's your business, make some great decisions for your customers, ask for forgiveness later. I'd love for you to, take some risks. Like, it's okay to do that. And then, certainly as a leadership skill, you don't promote people into leadership or keep them there if they are not serving their team, right? If they're not really listening to the people on the front lines, encouraging them to bring them solutions to problems, not just problems, like empowering people to ask them, like, what do you want to do? What do you want to do about it? And then say, okay, go do it, run with it. That's, bringing a lot of autonomy to the workplace without the title, right? And anybody can do that at any level in the company. Just unlock the potential in the people you already have on your team. They're your biggest asset.
As a follow-up to that, because you mentioned something, and as soon as you said it, I recalled, like, my own personal behaviors, right? So when you're dealing with a lot of entrepreneurs, many of them have to sort through all the bits, and come up with solutions relatively quickly so they can kind of, again, continue pushing that rock. Hopefully at one point it starts to roll by itself, right? But they're continuing to sort of push that rock. When I think that in the early stages, as I reflect on even my own experience, in the early stages, when people would bring me an issue, I would provide the solution to it because I needed to do that for myself as well. There is sort of this trigger though, right? You have to almost retrain yourself to take that moment when someone brings you a question, even if you happen to know or you think you know the answer, to give them that space in order to actually bring the solution or offer up some solutions. Otherwise, you end up in this space where you just mentioned, right? Where people are bringing you problems versus bringing you solutions, right? So there's kind of this dynamic shift that has to happen between your leadership team, recognizing that they problem solve pretty quickly, probably. Otherwise, they might not have gotten to where they are. At the same time, that behavior conditions the people to just bring you problems, right? You become the complaint department.
It's the number one thing that once I figured that out, I was like, oh my gosh, this is a light bulb moment. To instead of having people line up at your office and bringing you problems, to say, what do you think we should do? Come back, and they look at you with a blank look, and you say, come back to me when you have 2 ideas, and then tell me which one you think you want to do. And what's really amazing is when people do that, and they're like, they have to go do the work, and then they come back with the idea, and you're like, that sounds great. Can you run with that? And they just light up, right? There's nothing more. It feels great as a leader to also share the backpack, right? You're carrying this load, and it feels like everybody needs you for everything. But reality is you can just really teach them how and empower them to make some decisions. I grew up in very collaborative leadership silos where not a silo, but there wasn't dictator leader and let me go tell you what to do and everybody follows in the military where it just felt really right for leaders to want to say hey, I've got this idea, Jeff, what do you think about it? So this idea, and organizations get to this certain size where it goes from startup mode, everybody's in the room and has a proverbial or a physical seat at the table, and then you get bigger, and that has to change because it's not scalable. Not everybody can always be in there to inform the decision. So by figuring out who owns this decision, and then culturally, what smart people do we need to have around us to help us with it, right? And that can allow leaders to become more vulnerable. So a real world scenario might be our sales number for this quarter. The last quarter was 10, and we were at 8. So there was a gap between 8 and 10. And that leader coming prepared to meet with their peers and say, last quarter we underperformed by 2. We were at 8. We're supposed to be at 10. And they should be expected at that point to say, here's the plan. Here's what we're doing about it. Yep. It's pretty convincing. Everybody in the room should be I like that plan. We're going to get back on track. Yeah. But also, if there is no plan, to create the safety to say, what smart people do we need to grab? And let's go drop ourselves in the war room and talk about this until we come up with a good plan. And it's okay. If you don't have a plan, you've got all these great people, let's get the smartest people we know to collaborate and build the best plan so that we can not miss a beat. Let's not have another meeting where we're still behind or the gap is widening.
Yeah. I love that.
So that leader doesn't sit in fear and say, oh gosh, I have to go to another meeting. My peers are all judging me. But okay, what are we going to do about it? And it becomes a we, not a just this. They own it, but how can we help you? Right. And that creates a lot of place for people to become really vulnerable. That's just a really practical example that comes to mind with sales leaders. Because if you're behind, and a lot of people are right now, people really don't want to sit there and look at the data. They want to know what we're doing about it.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, that also creates this whole entire culture of cultivating new leadership as well. When you have leaders that are coming down, you're in your war room or your tiger team or whatever it might be, when you're asking the questions and you're driving that voice, you're getting all the different ideas. So you can bring back to your peers when you're sitting in that room and being able to have those ideas. But now you have new leadership that's also coming up, which we always need to encourage new leadership. So I love that because what you described truly is courageous leadership. I think through and through. So having that voice is so important throughout. I mean, I've experienced that with you, Ericka. Even when you've worked with your vendors, you're always like, what's your idea? What would you do? What are the different ideas? Okay, now you can run that with someone else on the team and you guys can do this together. Let's make this happen. But it's such a invaluable lesson and can help so much, which I absolutely love here. One of the things I was kind of just also thinking about here is, I mean, when these folks have the courage to kind of use their voice, it really, really helps them kind of also break through any noise that's also happening when in the room. So what it does is it's like showing up with the curiosity and the respect, and it like helps other people just really kind of make sure that their voices can also get to the top when you're amongst other leaders throughout. And I think that's such a great story to tell here. Completely.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, a lot of the innovation happens from the people on the front lines or the newest people in your organization, because they might, if you've had a lot of tenure in your organization, or you've worked around the same people and the same teams, you can be kind of insular and forget to pick your head up and like really value what's happening outside of your company. You just think your ways, right? So that can also, that can happen in small microcosms of teams where people, even just grabbing like the newest people in your company and say, hi, how are you doing? What do you need? Is there anything you need to do your job better or to service your clients? Like, what ideas do you have for how we could improve? People love that. And, I became a little bit of a student of neuroscience. Another fun fact about me, Erin, is I
love it.
I really got interested into like, how do you engage employees? Like, what is it about employees that really unlocks their potential in this time of like quiet quitting and all these other things? Like, engagement has been all over the place. And how do you really figure that out? And people that are highly engaged are like 3 times more productive than those that are not. So what is it? And I'm a huge fan of Dan Pink. He wrote a great book called Drive, if you're familiar with it. He talks about at a very intrinsic level, humans need 3 things. They need autonomy, they need mastery, and they need purpose. And he did all these like really cool data-driven experiments about compensation, carrots and sticks, and like, what are those things? And I love that for entrepreneurs, right? This idea of like, make smart decisions, run your desk like it's your business. Obviously we're going to give you some flexible frameworks to operate in for scale. I mean, that's the COO and me. But like, at the end of the day, we're really trying to create amazing experiences for our customers. And that's where a lot of the magic happens. We would find ourselves like sitting there just in awe of the cool stuff our employees were doing. And, I actually took a page from Southwest Airlines early in my career because I loved that they were making it so fun. They had a core value system and they made it really fun to celebrate their customers. And you get on a Southwest flight and their flight attendants aren't afraid to get a little silly with you. And they just set themselves up, and they knew how to do that really well. So when, we had employees like going to the store or drive through windows or blowing up balloons and making posters and doing stuff that costs really less than $5 to say, thank you so much. We really appreciate your business in a lot of creative ways. It was really cool to see and be a part of. There was no like rule book or playbook of like, okay, when you land a new account, take a selfie and send a picture of yourself with balloons.
Right.
Buy the t-shirt. It was just like fun people trying to create amazing experiences. And me making those little hearts, those dumb little hearts with all the little tiny books, like it's just like kind of wired, right? It's this idea of like, what are you doing to, create an amazing experience for the people that you're around, right? And those ideas come from people right there in your office.
Yeah. Well, I think you mentioned something like you teased up the fact, right? It's the operations person in you, right? Is having systems in place that allow people to navigate through it. And I think it's also worth noting, right? That on the back of, you don't want to necessarily just like open up the gates or open up the doors and like let people do whatever they want. There does need to be some guidance in place. And I also think it's also worth noting that like if these things that we're talking about don't come natural to you, it's a shift of mindset. It's a shift of, the way that you prioritize your responses. And what I'll say is it would, of course, be easier to just say, like, I want this, give me this now. But that doesn't necessarily yield an environment that inspires people to do more and to go beyond. And so I think just as like a quick pause moment for this particular episode is if you take just a second and you think about your organization and you're laying out like when we land a new client, take a selfie with them, get that over to this group, have marketing do a thing. Like if it is that prescribed, then it tends to lack the authenticity that a brand needs for it to get the communal response that you're trying to elicit. So you're not going to get that viral campaign to occur if you're painting by such a structured number kit that it doesn't allow your people to actually connect at that level. So all of this is absolutely, I think, where organizations should go. It is also, though, like it should go without saying that like it requires you to think a little bit differently. And so let's move into how to actually build this culture, right? So how do you build a culture where people feel safe in order to kind of bring ideas to the surface, to take ownership, or to even move, as you said before, right? Like do it now, like beg for forgiveness later, but like even moving without necessarily having permission. So like either from the operations perspective or even from the entrepreneurial perspective, what do you think organizations should do to get that in place?
I mean, it's the easy answer for me. It's a quick one. Like double down on your core values. I think only 10% of organizations take them very seriously beyond the poster on the wall, and get explicit about what you mean by that, right? If your core value is teamwork, how you define what that looks like when you show up every day is unique to you. So an example of that at Ettain Group, we define teamwork as in a different way. We had an element of sacrifice, and it was about creating opportunity for other people and giving up things and doing things to develop someone next to you. And because that was a definition, it was really a powerful thing, right? It wasn't just we're celebrating each other's successes, because a lot of people use the word teamwork as a piece of their core values. Or accountability is not just about holding yourself accountable. It's also about being courageous enough to hold your peers accountable.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Yeah.
How you define it. And I say that because every single conversation I have with everybody that I work with, if there's a minute, I'll ask our audience, like think about somebody on your team that did something recently and you were just like, oh my gosh, I've got this person that's like the thorn in my side. Maybe they're a top producer, but there's just something off. They're not getting it done, or something's frustrating you. If you ask yourself, like, what is it that they're doing that's bothering you? And then look at your values and say, like, is this one of our core values? If it's not, then you need to revisit your core values, right? And if it is, like your core values, if defined well, and I'm really passionate about this topic, like you can use it to have every conversation, to coach people, recognize them, thank them, give them raises, promotions, all the things. You can also use it to have performance conversations, and it should be a lens that you use to make decisions.
Completely.
It becomes so easy when your values are defined, and that's how you bring them to life. But you have to be willing to make tough decisions. So if what is your like ride or die, like if we're not upholding these values, or you're willing to make a decision that means even your top producer does not have a room on the bus. Like if it's a privilege to be on the rocket ship, that is your company. When somebody is consistently not playing by the same rule book of behaviors that you've defined, like do they deserve a seat on the bus? And being confident and courageous enough to say, not here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've got to be really willing. If you're going to put these things on the wall, you've got to really be willing to live by them. And it sounds really simple, but to me, that's like the key to everything. Every decision you make, or every frustration you have, it becomes so easy if you just go back to your values and say, well, how does this align?
Did it match?
Yeah.
Usually when it hurts, it didn't match.
Well, and I see like core values, even when you're hiring for new people, like that was like a huge part of going through interviews. Do these people align with our core values to make sure that they're going to be a right cultural fit? And then, I mean, I know, Ericka, you guys were huge on core values at Ettain Group. Well, I'm interested when you did find the right fit, though, because I know you also use core values in your interviewing and who was the right fit for Ettain. What did it look like for them when they first started and like their day one? What did you guys do to incorporate core values or anything into their experience from the very beginning of starting with Ettain, and what you recommend for others?
We were very, passionate about living them, and it was really important. Like if the founders are going to get involved, like every day, first new hire class, that's topic of conversation. But it shows up in everything, right? I actually recently learned, so Ettain Group was acquired by Manpower Group, Experis operating under that brand. And the award that we set out was honoring one of our partners, Rob Eubank, who passed away of colon cancer 15 years ago last month.
Wow.
And we set out an award called the Rob Eubank Memorial Award, which went out to the one individual who exemplified our core values, and it was through peer recognition, right? So the peers, and it was the highest honor in the business, and that award still stands 15 years
amazing.
Later, right? So when you think about the culture and the values and just living them, that language is used throughout, and it takes when you're small, it's actually pretty easy. The bigger you get, the harder it becomes, right? When you start, buying companies and figuring out like how do you merge cultures, and that's just a strong testament to the strength of the culture that we had. That's very difficult to replicate at somewhere else, but it was really special.
One of the exercises I had done early on was to actually map behaviors to the core values. So to actually extend it out a bit further, to know truly what it meant, like what is it that you were looking for? So instead of saying that like, oh, we are looking for people who are adaptable or proactive or accountable, like I actually would stitch the behavior that we're looking for in different things if we're interviewing people or what have you. So that may help, like as people are kind of like looking at their own core values and trying to figure out if they're sufficient enough. I would say, pressure test it and see if there's a behavior that you can attach to that particular thing, and see if maybe that is still a behavior that you want to endorse. Because sometimes you might want to change those things.
I was just going to say, Jeff, I worked with a company recently last quarter in December and led a workshop. There was about 25 employees, and the leadership team was wrestling with this. They'd done a lot of work on their values. They defined them, but they really weren't sticking, and they were kind of becoming more gamified. So they actually decided to bring everybody together, and we had a workshop where the employees defined the behaviors.
Love it.
And, when they're 25 people strong, that might feel like, oh, we all got together and did this thing. But when they fast forward in 5 years and they were like, I was in the room when we defined these. It's what they were doing is really,
it means something.
Yeah, the ownership is huge.
Yeah, they took it really seriously and did a great job.
So if someone is heeding our warning, if you will, or our recommendations, however you want to slice it, whether the cup is half full or half empty, what's the time frame that you think someone should consider when investing in this? I mean, you already have like, I'm hook, line, and sinker. I already believe that this is the way that we should be going. But like for anyone who maybe hasn't had this focus, they've tried to answer and resolve things immediately. They have a culture that when they look at it, maybe they don't necessarily have those behaviors attached to core values. They have people who are bringing the problems and not the solutions. So if they're going to make this shift and they're going to announce it, so to speak, that as of this day, we're going to open up the doors and have this policy and process, and we want to get you all more involved and more engaged. Consistency is important, but also expectations are too. So like, how long do you think it takes for an organization to make that adjustment, or to see the impact of the adjustment, I should say?
I think it's a great question. I don't know if it's like put a timestamp on it. I think it starts with the leader and how serious you want to actually like really do this and how committed you are to it. A lot of entrepreneurs like go away to a conference, they listen to a podcast, they are really inspired by something, and then they go back to their office and they don't really know how to bring it to life. Or they might think they don't have a culture problem, right? So like if you have core values, do they need tweaking? They may not realize that they might need tweaking. So just like, what do you want to do about it? What's the lift going to be? Like, it's okay to like revisit your core values and say, we missed a couple, like, being honest with yourself to be like, hey, when I started this company, we were doing this. And, like there's some people use some language in their core values that might feel a little rough around the edges if you're going to go put them in front of your customers, and they might want to tweak and refine them a little bit. And I would say it's never too late to really like take care of the thing that's going to be the most important piece of how you show up, how it defines how you show up with your customers. It defines how you show up with each other. And that's one where you could like start by starting, and maybe you start by asking people or surveying them. I mean, there's some great like best place to work surveys. Like if you, instead of doing it for the marketing piece, you really want to hear from your employees, like, how are we doing? What can we do better? How can we, start by having conversations, and then figuring out who can you invite in to help you be a part of the change that you need to make. I would say, building core values in a vacuum in a workshop with like 3 leaders without involving the people, they're not going to buy into it unless they see that it's a part of it. And but I think it's different for everybody and kind of where you are, but it has to come from an authentic place. If you just want to like create new posters and paint your values on a wall and it doesn't mean anything and people don't believe you, then it's going to be a disaster.
It's a waste of time. Yeah, I hear you.
Exactly.
No, completely makes sense. And I mean, Ericka, everything you kind of really described here is really about leaders need to make sure that they're not operating in isolation, but they need to really make sure that they're working with all of the peers and everyone around them, which really kind of helps building this courageous culture. So it extends beyond the 4 walls that you're in your boardroom or in your desk or wherever you might be. How do the circles you build around you as a leader truly change what's possible for better or for worse?
I love that question. I mean, I've been a part of organizations that always valued going outside your 4 walls to learn and grow. Right? It's like just knowing that we aren't the smartest people in the room, and surround yourself with people that are smarter and better than I am, and just how do we learn and grow? And as a curious learner, just a part of how I'm wired and how I grew up. I believe wholeheartedly in the power of having, your internal circle, right? Your tiger teams, your committees, the people you lean on to get shit done, excuse my French, that, will tell you the real truth, right? The front line, somebody that's really connected of telling you when things went bad, they don't feel like they're going to get fired because they're coming to tell you that.
Right.
That's internal. I think that's really healthy. But then externally, like getting involved with peer groups, having advisors, coaches, mentors, those folks can be like, have a multiplier effect on you in ways that you may not even realize until much later on. Like I gave the example of Southwest Airlines. I cold called my first mentor. I wrote about it in the next book I've got coming out. Just having the courage to, learn from somebody outside your business that you really admire and appreciate. And what can that do for your business? Because, you need somebody that can help you zoom out when you're so in the weeds every day to help you kind of make sure you are focused on what's most important, your vision, your mission, and your values, but also like your growth strategy and, how we're going to tackle some of these uncertain things that have our heads spinning at night, that it might be too heavy of a conversation to have with the people on the front lines right now, because they're looking at you for all the answers, and you might need that safe space to process it with some peers outside the industry, in the industry, or your customers.
I love that idea of like zooming in and zooming out, right? Like kind of like using both your internal and your external worlds in order to try to like figure out where your safe place is for you to be able to ideate and kind of work through the process of those things. So having sort of the right circle for the right conversation really does set a table that I think makes this concept a lot more accessible for people. So I absolutely love that. So if someone's listening to this right now and they're feeling particularly stuck, and I kind of want to take this from two different vantage points, just because I think that the people who tend to listen to this are either in the leadership seat or want to be in the leadership seat. So like either they're already making decisions or they're change makers and they want to pursue that space. Where do they start as a leader? Where do you start? And if, let's say, maybe your leadership team isn't with you just yet, but you want to bring about change as a change maker, like where does that person start?
Like maybe you could start here this week saying to someone on your team that you're close to, that you trust, and could, feels like it won't be coming out of left field, but like, what's one conversation we're avoiding?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Like, what is it that we're not talking about? Sometimes, like, or listening around the table, like, what are we not talking about that we should be? I think the important part is how you respond, though. Just be ready for, some tough feedback, perhaps. So make sure you're there and ready to really listen and not defend. And from that, like, pick something you can go do.
Yeah, one thing.
Yeah, just pick something.
Right. Just take a first step. Like, don't sit around and wait and think about it too much. Get some, lean on a friend if you need to as a sounding board. But I think just take that first step.
I love this. Ericka, you have given so many amazing tips, and I think this is going to be so invaluable for so many people. I do have a tradition that we do, and I'm going to I want to ask you because you've been a speaker before, and I think all the tips that you give, everyone can learn from you every single time that they have a conversation. But I got to ask you, because it's part of going to be our 2026 Highly Adaptive playlist here. If you were to walk up on stage, and I don't even know what it is, what is going to be your walk-up song, or what's your walk-off song, like your mic drop moment song? You can have both.
Well, this is a tough one. I love music. I'm a huge fan of music of all genres, pretty much. But I was just talking about Rob Eubank, my late partner at Ettain Group, who passed away 15 years ago. And Michael Franti has a song called The Sound of Sunshine. And it's so happy and so positive. That song, like, literally Rob speaks to me through it. It never wears out. And Rob would say things. I mean, he had 2 years to live after his diagnosis. So he gave his gift of his time to me as one of his partners at work. And I'm so grateful for that. But he would say something like this. He would say to the team or anyone that was having a rough day or complaining about anything, he would say, "I don't have time for negativity." And he really meant it. You could feel really small really fast if you heard that, right? Coming from someone who had been diagnosed. So to me, that is like the song of just remembering you don't know what kind of day people are having, but also just like, to find the positive things in life and to spread it around. It's just a happy song.
I love it.
I'll pick that for today, but I have a lot of other songs depending on the walk up theme, Erin. But that's a good one.
Hey, that's a good one. I love Michael Franti. I've seen him multiple times in concert, and one of my favorite. He radiates positivity when he's on stage and through his music. So I absolutely love that. I think that's a great one.
So where can people find you? Yeah. Like, I think that after this, when people hear it, they might want to find you for getting more information, maybe get some suggestions from you to kind of figure out next steps. We've got a lot of events coming up with different conferences and such, but where can people find you? What events are you going to be at?
Yeah, well, I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. So if you're local, give me a call. But my website is HysonAdvisory.com. There's a link right there. You can schedule some time. We can have an intro call, eHyson@HysonAdvisory.com. Or you can find me on LinkedIn, reach out. I will certainly be at the upcoming Staffing Industry Analysts Executive Forum coming up in March. And I think that's the only conference I'm committed to until September. So for this upcoming
Good for
quarter.
you.
That's awesome. I know. How nice.
I will be at ASA, Virtual Thrive. I'm very active, involved in the American Staffing Association's Women in Leadership Interest Group. And got a webinar coming up next week about having mentors. If anybody wants to tune in, you can find a link to that on the ASA website.
That's amazing.
Perfect.
That's awesome. Well, look, I will say this conversation, if it did anything, I hope it made everyone a little bit more honest with yourself about whether your culture is one that is leading people in a space where it is safe and courageous, or if they're just surviving. And so courage, it's not a keynote topic. It's a daily decision. And if you're a leader that really supports this, I really hope that you share this episode with your peers who you think need to hear it. And if it pushed you to think differently, we'd also love to know, like, kind of what some of the things are that you've done and what some of the effects of those efforts have been. So definitely be sure to connect with us on LinkedIn and share your story of what you've done in order to bring courage into your workspace or into your community.
You guys, thank you for listening to Highly Adaptive. We're so excited that Ericka, you were able to join us here, and we cannot wait to see everyone next week for another great conversation. But until then, I will say, build something worth being courageous for. So thank you so much, Ericka.
Thank you both.
Awesome. Big thanks to Allied Insight, not just our sponsor, but an industry leader and preferred marketing partner to staffing and consulting businesses nationwide. If your firm is looking for expert level support that goes beyond the logo, you know where to go, alliedinsight.com. If this episode helped you, share it with your friends and colleagues and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. While you're there, consider leaving us a review, and when you're ready for more industry insights, articles, case studies, and more, find it on allthingsstaffing.com. This episode was produced and edited by Allied Insight, and the music provided by Home Music Stock. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.